Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Tara Glodowski, the Director of Community Impact for Education. And because you can't see me, I kind of feel like the great and powerful Oz. So, because I can't see you, I imagine you're all laughing heartily at that. So just a couple of housekeeping things before we get started. If anybody has questions throughout the event, please enter your questions into the chat box and I will voice those when we get to the Q&A portion towards the end of our offering. You all also received an attachment in your calendar invite that was sent as the reminder this morning. So when we get to kind of the tips portion, you'll be able to view that attachment. So I would like to welcome Lee Shipway. Lee is the co-founder and executive director of Peaceful Solutions Counseling in Wausau. She holds a bachelor's degree in social work from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and a master's degree in social work with an emphasis on families and treatment for the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Lee is licensed as a clinical social worker by the state of Wisconsin with 37 years of experience as a mental health therapist, providing individual, couples, family, and group therapy. She has been co-facilitating domestic abuser treatment programs for the SAFE program for 33 years. She is a past recipient of the Governor's Award for Excellence in Domestic Violence Services and the Women of Vision Award for the YWCA. So we're really excited to have Lee with us today, and welcome, Lee.
Thank you very much, Tara, and welcome to all of you who are joining us today. I'm hopefully going to give you some tips and tricks on how to help you get through this pandemic. As many people have said, this is a very unprecedented time, and with unprecedented time come challenges. And so we're going to help lessen some of that anxiety and depression about those challenges as we go through this presentation today. So here's an overview of what I'm going to talk about with you. I'm going to talk about the normal feelings that people are having during this time to help you feel like you're not all alone in this. We're going to explain how trauma affects the brain and what we can do to mitigate that. We're going to talk about how to calm the brain and the body because they're very interconnected. We're going to give you some anxiety reducing techniques, some mood enhancing techniques to help that depression lift. We're going to talk about dealing with kids at home, and we're going to talk about dealing with isolation, those of us who are at home and not at work ever. So I want you to think about some of the feelings that you've been having during the time of the isolation. Some of you are probably feeling depressed, you're probably feeling fatigued, you're feeling a little bit anxious, you're feeling isolated, you're feeling stressed out. All of those are normal feelings. Anytime there's a big change in human beings' lives, it disrupts our equilibrium. And it takes 6 to 8 weeks for a new equilibrium to be formed. Now, when we know that the safer at home order is extended, most people's reaction was, oh, geez, I can't believe we're going to keep doing this for 4 more weeks or 5 more weeks. You need to just kind of fasten your seatbelt and know that it's going to be okay, that it's a temporary situation, and we're going to talk about how to deal with that from a mental standpoint. So really, when you think about all those feelings you've been having, what we're talking about is trauma, you guys. We've all been experiencing a traumatic event. I love this definition by Eliana Gill, who is one of the premier therapists in the child abuse field. She says trauma is a sudden non-normative event. Think about that, non-normative. As we talk about unprecedented, this is so not normal that we're going through this pandemic. So it's a non-normative event that overwhelms the person's capacity to cope, debilitated by perceptions of loss of control. So loss of control is a very difficult thing for human beings to deal with. When we feel like we have control, we feel more calm, we feel less anxious. So after today's presentation, hopefully you're going to walk away with an increased capacity to cope because we're going to give you some skills to deal with that. So here's some examples of trauma that most people who are trauma therapists will list these as things that bring about trauma. I've highlighted the natural and man-made disasters because that's what we're dealing with throughout this pandemic. This is a natural disaster, and it's something that our world has never dealt with before, and that makes it feel even more scary, and it makes you feel like even less control. So effects of trauma is that it causes us to feel basically 3 things: hopeless, helpless, powerless. Sit with those for a minute and think about how powerful those are. What underlies all three of those is a basic feeling of fear. And anytime that we are feeling fearful, it puts the body into high danger mode, if you will. And that then upsets the central nervous system. The central nervous system is connected to how we deal emotionally with things. So everything is kind of out of kilter at this time. If you're feeling very fatigued throughout this pandemic, you're not alone. And the main reason for that is because our brains are working overtime. Our brains are used to doing some things on automatic pilot. There's many things that you used to do throughout your day that you really didn't have to think about. A really easy example is brushing your teeth, right? Nobody really thinks about that, you just kind of do it. It's a motion that you do. Driving to work, getting your coffee, sitting at your desk, getting things set up. Well, now that's all turned upside down because you're working in a different environment, because you might be working from home, or you're not working at all. And so you don't have a job that you have a structure to your day. So the brain is trying to put everything in order. And when it can't do that, it creates fatigue and it creates stress. So from a biological perspective, it increases the norepinephrine, the epinephrine, and the cortisol, which are all stress hormones. And what those do is it jacks up the body and makes you feel like you're on high alert. So I just want you to understand that that's what the body is going through, and that's why you're feeling that way. Now, to deal with that, there's two divergent paths that we as human beings can choose to go down. And I'm going to give you tips on how to do this. The first one's called emotional regulation. The second one is emotional dysregulation. And it's exactly what it says. When you're regulating your emotions, you have the ability to tolerate stress, to remain calm, and to stay relaxed, and then you're functioning. Your brain is able to work, you're able to do what you need to do, you're able to focus. Emotional dysregulation is experiencing stress outside of one's window of tolerance. Everybody has a different window of tolerance. Some people have a small level of tolerance, some have a high level of tolerance, and that depends on a lot of different factors. Depends on if you have had a nice, healthy, functioning childhood, and you have a lot of skills in your toolbox on how to handle stress. People that had dysfunctional childhoods aren't going to have as many tools in their toolbox, so their stress level is going to be pretty low, that they can't tolerate very much of it. So when that stress gets to a level that we're not able to handle, it creates uncomfortable or negative feelings. So let's talk about what I call the triangle connection, what most people know of as the mind, body, spirit connection. Those three things are very connected together, and each of those needs to have some nurturing, and I'm going to talk a little bit about each of those and how you can nurture those and make sure that they are working in sync. Because Eastern culture has known this for centuries, that there's this huge connection between the mind, body, and the spirit. Western culture's really only caught on to that, I'd say the last 20, maybe 25 years. So we're kind of infants in terms of knowing how to connect those three parts of ourselves together. So strategies to help increase feelings of safety for the body. So I'm going to focus on the body, then we're going to talk about the mind, and then we'll talk about the spirit. There's three very important things that the body has to have to survive: oxygen, food, and exercise. All of these calm the body. When you calm the body, you calm the mind. Because if you don't calm the mind, it gets into that fight, flight, or freeze response. That's when the epinephrine is soaring, the cortisol is soaring. Danger, Will Robinson, for those of you old enough to know that reference. So all of the cells in the body need oxygen to work well, including our brains. When the brain doesn't get enough oxygen, it doesn't work well, it can't focus. One of the things I'm going to do today is teach you a couple breathing techniques that's going to help you with that. Because a lot of times when we're under stress, we do what I call wimpy breathing, where your chest barely goes up and down because you're not doing very deep breaths. Or when we get sometimes scared, we hold our breath and then we let it go, and we hold it and we let it go. That stops the cycle of oxygen getting to the brain, and then the frontal lobe cortex is not able to function without that oxygen. So a lot of mental health is really about physical health as well, and connecting that breathing and oxygen to all parts of the body. Talking about food. Food is an important thing, not just because of the nutrition, but because of trauma. When people have been through trauma, they have a tendency, for example, kids who a lot of times were in foster care, who've been in families where they were physically abused or sexually abused or were neglected, haven't always had a good meal every day. And so when they get into foster care, they start hoarding food. They'll keep bananas or apples or even a half of a sandwich in their bedroom. And I always explain to foster parents, you need to let them do that. That's their sense of safety, because they didn't have that before. So that food is not just a nutritional thing, but it's a psychological thing for them. Exercise, and when I say exercise, I don't mean that you have to pump weights an hour a day, you have to run 4 miles, you have to swim a mile. Exercise is just moving the body. And we're going to talk about how important that movement is to the body and the mind and the spirit. All right, so let's start with that oxygen breath work that I was talking about a couple minutes ago. Excuse me. I have 2 breathing patterns that I want to teach you, and you're seeing that on your screen. One is called a basic breathing pattern. The other one is what we call 4-7-8 breathing pattern. Typically, I find that the basic breathing pattern works better for women, and I find that the 4-7-8 breathing pattern works better for men. But that's just generally, not always. So you may find that if you're a man, you might like the basic breathing better, and if you're a woman, you might like the 4-7-8 breathing pattern better. Now, the reason that this is so important is because that prefrontal cortex that I talked about before needs to process information, and the way it processes information is by having the amygdala, which is in the mid part of our brain, be nice and calm. When the amygdala gets what we call hijacked, as in I'm scared, I'm nervous, I have all these negative thoughts going through my mind, then that cortisol gets cranked up, the epinephrine and the norepinephrine, and it hijacks the brain. So the amygdala takes over, which shuts down the executive functioning in the front of the brain, and you just can't focus, you can't function. So you maybe have been experiencing some of that as you're trying to do your job, if you're working from home, or if you're trying to deal with your kids. I just want you to understand that that's normal, and that's a part of the human body and brain. But these breathing techniques are going to help you to tell the amygdala to shut up, basically, and to calm the brain down. So let's do the basic breathing pattern. I'm hoping you can see me well enough to do this. First, I want you to try and sit as straight in your chair as you can. And I want your back to be nice and straight, because the central nervous system, all the nerves run down your spine and then goes out to all the different parts of your body. So we need to get oxygen into all of those parts of the body, and it's going to travel through that spinal column. So what you're going to do is you're going to take a nice deep breath in to the count of 4, and then you're going to exhale all the way out to the count of 4. Now I'm going to show you this, and then we're going to do this together. So I'm going to go in and out. What you want to do is breathe in through your nose with your mouth closed, and then when you exhale, you want to make a whooshing sound. Don't feel silly about that. That's the best way for the body to get all of the air out. A lot of people think it's important to focus on the inhale only. It's just as important to focus on the exhale. By breathing in fully, breathing all the way out, that's what helps calm that amygdala, and then the brain calms down and the frontal lobe cortex can work. Now let me talk just for a second about the breath. When you take a deep breath in, you can't see this from the angle that you're at, but my stomach is going up and down, not just my chest. And the reason for that is that our lungs go all the way down to almost to where our stomach is, and they almost meet. And a lot of times people are only inflating the top part of the lung. You want to inflate the entire lung. Anybody who's ever been in a choir or sings knows the importance of that. You don't want to see your shoulders going up and down as you breathe. That means you're not inflating the lungs. Okay, so let's try this together. We're going to do 4 rounds of this. So here we go. I'm going to talk while you breathe. So we're going to breathe in, 2, 3, 4, exhale, 2, 3, 4. In, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4. In, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4. One more time. In, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4. Now, for some of you, you might be feeling a little lightheaded right now, and that's okay. What that tells you is that you have been doing probably wimpy breathing too much. You're not taking full breaths in, and so there's more oxygen getting flooded to your brain than it's used to, and so it's kind of going, wah. The more you practice this and you get used to doing this, the brain is going to accommodate that and it will get used to it. I highly suggest that you do this a minimum 3 times a day. You can do it while you're washing your hands for 20 seconds and singing the happy birthday song to yourself. You can do it while you're doing dishes. You can do it while you're cooking. You can do it while you're playing with your children, while you're doing your work. Nobody has to even know you're doing this, as you just normally do that breathing in and out. Okay, let's move to the second one. That's the 4-7-8 breathing pattern. This is a little bit more complicated, and what it does is that it takes the feeling part of the brain and it switches over to the thinking part of the brain. The reason I think this works so well for men is that men's feeling part of the brain is one hemisphere and the feeling is the other part of the other hemisphere. For women, however, our brains are different. There's 4 quadrants to the brain. We have feelings in all 4 quadrants. So when we switch from one side to the other, it doesn't really switch it because there's still feelings on that side of the brain. So for men, you might like this better. So you're going to inhale to the count of 4, preferably with your tongue on the roof of your mouth, like that. You're going to hold it for 7 counts, and then you're going to exhale for 8 counts. So I'm going to demonstrate this for you, and then we'll try this together. So you're going to inhale, hold, exhale. All right, now I'm going to try and count this out, but keep in mind everybody's lung capacity is a little bit different. Some of us have larger lungs than others, so I'm going to try and do a middle of the road. So for some of you, it may be a little too fast. Some of you, it might be a little too slow. Accommodate and change it and modify it as you need to. So we're going to start in 2, 3, 4, hold 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, out 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Again, in 2, 3, 4, hold 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, exhale 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. One more time. In 2, 3, 4, hold 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, out 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Just like the other breathing pattern, you want to practice this multiple times a day. Anytime you feel yourself getting anxious, this is probably the most important tool I'm going to teach you today. A lot of psychotherapy is not a bunch of magic wands and fancy stuff like people think. It's a lot of times doing very basic things like breathing. Anybody who ever meditates will tell you how important that breathing is. People who exercise will tell you how important that breathing is as well. Okay, let's move on to talking about food. I talked a little bit before about like the foster kids feeling felt safety is what we call that, where the body and the mind feels like they are in a safe place. Because you think about back in caveman days, if you're being chased by a tiger, you're not going to stop and eat some food, right? Because you're under stress and you are in that fight or flight mode. So when you're eating food, it sends a signal to the brain that I'm in a safe place, because I wouldn't be eating if I wasn't in a safe place. If I was being chased by a tiger, I would not be having food. So you want to make sure that you are doing good nutrition and you're doing that throughout the day because it helps to calm the mind. Interestingly, a lot of inpatient psychiatric wards, when someone is having a really difficult time, what we might call a meltdown, the first thing they'll do is offer them a snack. This is a very important thing that you can do with your kids as well. Throughout the day, if your kids are having meltdowns, it might be that they do need to have some felt safety. It might be that their blood sugar is going down a little bit, or that they don't have enough hydration. And so by offering them a drink, offering them a little small snack can go wonders. Okay, let's talk about our third part, which is exercise, or movement is the word I like to use. Because exercise, a lot of times people feel like, oh, it's a drudgery thing, I gotta do this, I don't wanna do it. If you think about just moving the body, that is what it needs for the brain to work better and sometimes to get in touch with spiritual things as well. People who meditate will tell you that a lot of times there's things called a walking meditation, where they are meditating as they're walking. I actually happen to be a jogger, and that's one of my favorite forms of exercise. And while I'm jogging, I am almost in a meditative state. I'm letting my mind get calm and relaxed. And I want you to think about this in a few minutes, we're going to talk about the brain. When you think about if you're running and going fast, being chased by a tiger, that's very scary, because what you're saying to yourself in your head is, oh my God, I'm being chased by a tiger. This is horrible. This is scared. I might die. Your body is doing the exact same movement when you're running or jogging, but you're not in a fight or flight response. So what you're saying to yourself in your head is, oh, this is nice. Look at the beautiful trees outside. Oh, look at the dandelion, or the daffodils are coming up. You're looking at other things, and what you're saying to yourself is what makes a difference in how the body reacts to that. I'll go into that more later. So planned movement is the phrase I'm going to use. You're planning to move that body by running, walking, skipping, biking, dancing, tai chi, yoga. And when you think about all of those, the thing that they all have in common is that you have to have good oxygen intake to be able to do all of those things. I particularly like the skipping one, because that as well kind of gets you out of your adult brain and gets you into your kid mode, and that just feels a little more playful, and that also elevates your mood. Okay, more about taming the mind. I want to talk a little bit about mindfulness. Mindfulness is where you are paying attention to exactly what's going on at the present moment in this second of time. And it can be more difficult than people think, but it's hugely helpful to get us out of our head of what I call monkey chatter, the monkey brain chatter. A lot of people will call it who practice meditation. And a lot of times that monkey chatter is just worrisome thoughts after worrisome thought after worrisome thought. So you want to stop that pattern, and you want to break that fight, flight, or freeze response. Mindfulness is a way to do that, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later. Thinking about the future brings anxiety. You don't want to do that. So you need to focus on, how am I going to manage my expectations? Like, if we start making stories up in our heads about the what if things, oh, what if this happens? What if that happens? It just creates more anxiety and gets you more into that fight or flight response. You need to think about this pandemic. It's not a sprint. This is a marathon, and we have to kind of pace ourselves in terms of how we're going to deal with that. I once had the pleasure of, for many years, working with one of the best psychiatrists I've ever known, Dr. Charles Garvey, here in Wausau, and he would often tell his patients, you don't want to borrow troubles from the future. And I loved that, because that's really what worry is. It's borrowing troubles from the future. It's thinking about things that haven't happened yet and conjuring up the worst of what might happen, and that just creates that buildup of all those bad chemicals that makes you feel more anxious. So pay attention to staying away from catastrophizing. Oh, what if I get this? What if I pass this to my children? What if I give this to my mother or father or grandparents? The what if, stay away from that. It doesn't help. You need to stay grounded in what you actually know for facts at this moment in time. So I know that we have some people signed up today who are from Aspirus, and I'm going to guess that some of those are medical workers. I want to talk about visualization for a couple minutes with you. Visualization is something very important. When we do meditation sometimes, or even just deep breathing, we can pair that with a visualization. So for medical workers, I want you to think about this. If you're working in a clinic, if you're working in a hospital setting with patients that are ill, I want you to do that deep breathing every day before you go into work, and I want you to do that throughout the day. But I want you to also pair it with this. I want you to visualize that you have a force field that is around you. If you want to think about Star Trek and how they used to have that force field in front of the Starship Enterprise, think of that. If you want to think of yourself in a bubble and that the virus cannot get into that bubble, it can't get through that force field. Some people say they find it helpful to have a visualization of being in a rain slicker with one of those big yellow hats that they people are depressed. So when they take an antidepressant medication, it's a serotonin uptake that is being delivered in that pill form. So a lot of times when I am teaching clients how to do the breathing technique, I walk them through a visualization as well that shows them how powerful the brain is. And I want to do this with you for just a few minutes. So I want you to get comfortable in your chair. And I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. And I'm going to have you breathe deeply in and exhale all the way out. Breathe deeply in and exhale all the way out. We're going to do that 2 more times. Breathe deeply in and exhale all the way out. Very good. Now I want you to keep your eyes closed. And as you continue to breathe deeply in and exhale all the way out, I want you to think and picture a lemon. I want you to see that lemon. I want you to look at it from every angle that you can look at it. You're going to pick that lemon up in your hand. You're going to turn it around. You're going to notice the bumpiness of it. You're going to notice the roughness of parts of the lemon and the smoothness of other parts of the outside rind. You're going to put that lemon up to your nose and you're going to smell that lemon. And it's a nice, fresh, plump, bright yellow lemon. And now you're going to take a knife and you're going to get a cutting board out. You're going to place that lemon on the cutting board. You're going to slice it right through the middle. Oh, and you can smell that lemony scent waft up into your nose. Now you're going to take each of those halves and you're going to cut those in half. And now you have 4 quarters. And now you're going to cut each of those again so that you have 8 quarters, 8 pieces of that lemon, and you can see it and you can smell it. Now I want you to take a deep breath in, exhale all the way out, open your eyes and come back to the presentation. Now, some of you probably are tasting that lemon in your mouth right now because you were able to visualize that so well and be able to think of all the different senses that it actually produced a lemon tartness in your mouth. That is the power of the brain. So by what we say to ourselves is what creates our thoughts, and I'll talk about that in a little while. The thoughts are important to making sure that we're staying calm and relaxed. So back to the presentation brings us to the next point, and I cannot stress this enough. When people have talked to me, my friends, my family members, saying, like, Lee, if there's one thing I should do during this pandemic, what is it? And my number one answer is quit watching the news, or curtail the amount of time that you watch the news every day. 5 minutes, 7 minutes, maybe 10 minutes a day is all you need to get brought up to date on what's happening. Because let's face it, news sources are focusing on the sensationalism of it. Sometimes about once a week, I'll watch the national news if I'm able to get home by 5:30, because I am still going to the work and working. We're an essential business, as the medical field is. And so I get home at 5:30 and I watch the news, and here's what I've noticed. 25 minutes of all the horrible things that are going on in the world and all of the pandemic, and then the last 3 to 4 minutes, something uplifting about something that someone's doing to help other human beings during this crisis, which is lovely, but it's only 3 or 4 minutes compared to the 25 minutes of the doom and gloom. The more you put bad news into your brain, the more it's just going to create all that fight or flight response in your body again. The other thing I want to caution you about is making sure that you are getting your news from reliable sources. There's all kinds of things on Facebook that people are posting that just are not really accurate. If you want to really know about the pandemic and about the epidemiology of it, go to the National Institute of Health, go to the CDC, go to the Department of Health Services for the state of Wisconsin. That's where you're going to get reliable information. Okay, the last part on this slide is talking about positive self-talk. There's positive self-talk and there's negative self-talk. And this is something that we use a lot in the therapy world, and it's what you probably heard of as cognitive behavioral therapy. So this next slide shows you what cognitive behavioral therapy techniques are. I'm taking this down to 3 parts of it. There's really 5 parts of it, but this is the part you need to know. Our thoughts create our feelings, And out of our feelings, we then choose actions. A lot of times people think that I have a feeling, it just comes out of nowhere. I can't control my feelings, they're just there. That's absolutely not true. Every single feeling that you have comes from a thought that you are saying to yourself inside your head. No one's inserting those thoughts in your head. You are choosing the thoughts that you think. So here's an example of negative self-talk on this slide. So the thought, oh my God, there's no cure for this. We are all going to die. What kind of feelings is that going to bring up? Obviously, fear and anxiety. You can just feel it rising in you as you say those words or hear me say those words out loud. So what might be an action that you choose as a result of that fear and anxiety? You are going to be ruminating in your head, thinking about all the negative stuff about the pandemic. You're going to be barricading yourself and closing yourself out from your family. You're going to be isolating yourself from other people in your usual circle. You might be doing excessive researching on the internet about all the different things. And what does that do? It just gives you more doom and gloom and more things to be afraid of. It's a vicious circle and cycle that just keeps going around and around and around. Instead of doing that, we're going to do positive self-talk. Now, positive self-talk does not mean you're going to lie to yourself. You are going to give yourself facts, but you're going to focus on the good part of those facts. So example, the thought I'm going to choose is, I will do what I can to protect my family. The best scientists in the world are working on this. Think about that. The best scientists in the entire world are working on a vaccine. They're working on a treatment. That is powerful. This is a temporary situation, is another positive thing you can say to yourself. As I say those sentences, it probably, it should produce the feeling of calmness and being reassured. So as a result of that, what actions am I going to choose? I'm going to wash my hands for 20 seconds, multiple times a day, because that's what the scientists are showing that it works to help get the virus to not be transmitted to other people or to myself. I'm going to do social distancing when I can, because that as well shows that the scientists know that that helps. But I'm also going to connect with other people via virtual means, because I know that I don't want to isolate myself and I need to have that human connection. And because I'm doing all those things, I'm going to be able to focus on parenting. I'm going to have that frontal part of my brain working because I haven't let the amygdala hijack that part of the brain. I'm going to be calm and relaxed. There's a really wonderful quote that I loved by a man by the name of David Barlow, who says, anxiety is caused by an overestimation of the problem and an underestimation of the resources to deal with it. An overestimation of the problem and underestimation of the resources to deal with it. We need to flip that around by making sure that we are estimating correctly the resources that we have to deal with it and not overestimating the problem. So this positive self-talk, you may think, really, this is it? Like, that seems pretty simple. It's simple, but it's hard to do. And so what you have to do, the challenge, is to catch yourself when you're having those negative thoughts going through your brain. And you're going to catch yourself doing this multiple times a day. Even me as a therapist for 37 years, I catch myself having negative thoughts. And what I do is I picture a red stop sign in my mind, or I'll say out loud to myself, Lee, stop it. That's not helpful. So I go, it's not a helpful thought. I'm going to then insert a helpful thought in that place. And I'm not being Pollyannish here. Let me share with you, I am a 2-time breast cancer survivor. I raised a child with insulin-dependent diabetes who was diagnosed at 23 months of age. I just lost my mom on March 21st, who passed away at the age of 89. I've been through difficult things in my life. So it's difficult, but it's doable. And I want you to be able to apply this to your day-to-day life. So here's another technique that we use in the therapy world. I'm calling it perspective. In the therapy world, we call it reframing. We'll take somebody's thoughts about something and we'll say, well, instead of looking at it that way, what happens if you look at it this way? And it gives them an outside perspective. I went to a seminar years ago on stress management, and this was one of the things that the presenter taught us, was to write down, not just say this, but writing is important, because when you write something down, it gets into the executive part of your brain, and it also evokes the feeling parts. Because when you type things, it only is in your brain. When you handwrite them, it also gets into the feeling part of the part of the brain. So he said 3 times, you're going to write down 3 times, at least I'm not, at least I'm not, at least I'm not, and you fill in the blanks. So for example, you might say to yourself, at least I'm not at the epicenter in New York City working on an ICU unit. At least I'm not living in a war-torn country where my house is being bombed and my children cannot even go outside and play. At least I'm not living on the streets and homeless where I can't even find a place to wash my hands. Maybe some of you have seen the commercial that's been on TV lately, and I can't remember what it's for, but it shows a boy walking on the streets, and the voiceover talks about how do you wash your hands for 20 seconds when you don't even have water or soap because you don't have a home to live in and you're homeless. I love that commercial because it puts things in perspective and gets us to realize that things always could be worse. Even in the middle of a pandemic, things can be worse. And so you need to sometimes get a grip on yourself and say, I'm going to focus on what the positives are and not allow myself to let my negative self-talk run away with me. Okay, the third part of our mind, body, spirit is spiritual factors. So a belief in God, or for people who don't believe in God, a higher power, or some higher entity or universal energy is what some people will talk about. Lots and lots of research shows that people that have some grounding in a spiritual practice do a lot better in times of upheaval. Prayer. Some people don't like prayer. Maybe chanting, meditating can also be in this into this arena. So I said before that I was talking about the thoughts, feelings, actions. The part I left out was the beliefs. Beliefs are hugely important because every thought that you have is filtered through your belief systems. Now, we get our belief systems from the families we grew up in, from the institutions that were part of our lives when we were children. For example, your educational institution, maybe your faith community that you were raised in, lots of different beliefs. I'll give you a quick example. There's kind of 2 different camps of people in the world. One that believes people are trustworthy and doing the best they can with what they've got, and another camp that believes you can't trust people and they'll treat you badly any chance they get. Let's say the person who has the belief system of you can trust people and they're doing the best they can, goes to the store, comes home and realizes that they were given the wrong change by the cashier. Their thoughts would be, oh, I'm sure it's an honest mistake. Maybe it was a new cashier. They weren't familiar with how to do this. And they feel calm about that. The action is they go back to the store with a receipt and explain that they didn't get the right change, right? The other person who believes anybody's gonna kind of screw you over any chance they get would have the thought of, oh, they did this to me on purpose. They're trying to cheat me. What's the matter with these people? Are they idiots? All those kind of yucky thoughts, which then can create feelings of anger. And the action might be that they go to the store and yell and scream, or maybe even do something violent, right? 2 very different action results from the exact same event, but it's the belief system that made those thoughts go one way or the other. Excuse me. So in a spiritual sense, this Serenity Prayer could not be more apt than it is right now during this pandemic. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. That is huge. You have to accept there's things I can't change, so quit focusing on them. Quit ruminating about them. Courage to change the things I can. Focus on what you can change, what you have control over, and do what you can with that. And wisdom to know the difference, being able to figure out which is which. That kind of says it all. Okay, pitfalls. Sometimes when I teach people about positive self-talk and about the amygdala and all these different things, they'll say, oh, they feel shameful because they're still feeling anxious and they feel like a failure. I'm like, no, that's still positive. That's negative self-talk. You need to switch that to, it's okay. I'm going to give myself permission to make some mistakes and I'm doing the best I can with what I've got. People might say, oh, I should be isolating better. You know, I'm not liking being home alone. It's okay if you're having a tough time with that. Allow yourself to have a tough time with that. Go into the feeling and work it through the other side. Or you might say, I'm a failure at positive self-talk. Nobody's going to be 100% good at this all the time. Nobody. You're going to fail at that, and that's okay. Be cognizant that it's going to take some time and some practice. So allow yourself to be human. Know that you're going to have moments of feeling anxious. Recognize those moments. Notice what thoughts you're saying to yourself at those moments that you're feeling anxious, because that's always the key, is that you need to change those thoughts. Do your best to change those, and it will make a big difference. Remember that we will get through this together. Resilience is in our DNA. It's been passed on from generation to generation. Tons of research talks about epigenetics, that from one century to another, the cells in the human body change based on what our grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents did. So think about all the things that as a human culture we have survived. The Great Depression, the Spanish flu, the Tokyo flu, World War I, World War II, the Civil War. I mean, there's many different horrible things that have occurred, and still the human existence has continued. Okay, there's some references, and I think that I think Tara or Ben is going to send the PowerPoint out to you afterwards if you haven't received it already. But I wanted you to have these references of some of the articles and books that went into making up the PowerPoint. Tara, how many questions are you getting in right now? Because I have one more thing I wanted to share, the handout that was emailed out, but I want to see if I need to save a little more time for questions.
We have about 6 or 7 questions right now, Lee.
Okay, then I'm going to kind of do a shortened version of the handout that I hope you all got in your email this morning. It says tips for lessening depression and anxiety during COVID-19. It's a list of 28 different things, and there's more than this, but I just kind of took the top 28 that seemed to be the most helpful. I'm going to just highlight a few that, because you've probably read a lot of information from different sources as we're going through this pandemic, but there might be some that you've not read. Number one is a really good one. Look at old photo albums, whether that's on your phone that you have a photo album or actually in an actual photo album, for those of us that have those still from the olden days. And reminisce about all the fun you had on a vacation. Do this with your kids if you have children. And kind of like that lemon exercise I did with you, have the kids talk about what they remembered from the sounds of that vacation. What did they remember from the smells from that vacation? What do they remember, like maybe being in the ocean, the water splashing on their skin? You want to try and engage all 5 senses, because then that brings that memory really clear, and that helps you feel more relaxed. And remind yourselves, we're going to do vacations again. We're going to get back to that. We just can't do it at this point. Number 2 is one of my favorites. Write a daily gratitude journal. And it has to be at least 3 things that you are grateful for. A lot of people do this at bedtime before they go to bed, and it helps set the mood for the next day. Because again, you want to look at the positives, not the negatives. Number 3, color in what's called adult coloring books. You can buy these online. They're very intricate drawings of, like, I don't know, like a forest scene or all kinds of different things, but teeny little parts that you have to color with colored pencils. It's a great anxiety reducer because you have to focus and concentrate on that. Number 6, focus on being mindful as you do your daily chores. So whether you are washing the dishes, you're folding laundry, usually we go through those and we just kind of go through them on autopilot. Instead of doing autopilot, really focus on, what does this feel like to have my hands in the warm water as I'm washing the dishes? What does the soap on my hands feel like? What does the texture of the plate feel like? Listen to the squeakiness as I dry the glasses. If you focus on the minute little parts of that, it helps your brain relax because it takes it out of the catastrophizing and thinking about all the what ifs. Number 9, meditate for 60 seconds 3 times a day. Visualize your immune system being strong. So as you're meditating, one of the things I do is as I exhale out, I think of all of the toxins leaving my body. As I exhale in, I visualize blue light coming down and shining over my entire body, and that blue light is healing light. This is another technique that would be great for medical workers if you're concerned about the virus and contracting that. Number 12, drive to a location that has water or trees. You know, yes, we're all isolating at home, but that doesn't mean you can't get in your car and drive somewhere. My sister this weekend texted me and said, my daughter and I are driving somewhere. I don't care where, we're just getting in the car and we're driving. Good idea, a change of scenery. But even better, if you can go somewhere where there's water or trees and being in nature, they have very big, huge healing elements. You can walk along the river path, like behind the eye clinic. It's beautiful. As long as you stay 6 feet away from people, you can still do that. Go to a park, soak that all in. That's very healing. Number 16, allow yourself to cry if you need to. Interestingly, happy tears are different than sad tears. Sad tears have toxins in them, and so when you cry, it gets the toxins out of your body. Happy tears do not have those toxins. So it's okay to cry, men as well as women. A little bit of crying, a lot of times people feel better after that, and that's why, because the toxins are released. 18, watch a movie, but watch comedies. Lots of research has shown that cancer survivors sometimes have been able to heal themselves strictly by watching comedies and laughing. Laughing changes the cellular makeup of the body. Number 20, do something to help brighten somebody else's day. When I talked before about meditation and that increases the serotonin levels, when you do something nice for someone else, even just giving someone a compliment, not only does that increase their serotonin level, it increases your serotonin level. Number 26, do recess at home. This is for people with kids at home. And there is a website, it's playworks.org. I was on there yesterday. There's all kinds of videos that show you all kinds of fun games that you can do inside your house or your apartment with your kids. So I'm going to now stop, and Tara, if you want to pick out some questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Great, thanks, Lee. Is it good to schedule snacks and breathing exercises, or should you just wait until you feel you need them because you're feeling stressed?
Great idea. Great question. So let me talk about kids first and then adults. For kids, little kids especially, need snacks every day. They need 6 little meals a day. So you have breakfast, a mid-morning snack, lunch, a mid-afternoon snack, supper, and a bedtime snack. Most nutritionists will tell you that we all should eat that way, that we do better when we do 6 little snacks a day rather than 3 big, huge, heavy meals. For adults, I always say if you find yourself getting cranky, you're feeling your energy level going down, the number one thing first is drink a glass of water. If that doesn't help you feel better, then I would say have a little bit of a snack.
Great. Kind of along that same line, why am I eating the wrong things? I see McDonald's and then I can feel compelled to go and get a Big Mac.
I understand exactly what you're saying, and I've done that at times too. Our bodies sometimes crave fat, because when you're craving chocolate or you're craving McDonald's burgers, it's really the fat that we're craving. Some of that is because when you're in that fight or flight mode in your brain, it fakes the body into thinking that you are like in the middle of a famine or that you're in the middle of the depression. And so fat is what helps the body survive so that it keeps going on. What you got to do, let yourself have that sometimes. Everything in moderation. I'm not saying you can't ever have a Big Mac or you can't have some chocolate. Have a little bit, but then try to make sure that you're also counterbalancing that with better nutrition. And don't beat yourself up for like, oh, I shouldn't have ate that. This is really horrible. Now it's as bad. Just let it go. Think about clouds, floating through the sky. Same thing with negative thoughts and negative behaviors. Let them go and move on to the next cloud and have that be a better way of functioning.
What would you recommend for kids and families going through this together? Do you have any tips on dealing with family members in your home at the same time?
Yeah, this is a question I've been getting a lot. And I have a list of some things that I'm just going to read off for parents who are sequestered with their children. Some things that maybe you've thought of, some things that maybe you haven't thought of. But first, let me say this. The mood of the house is going to be contingent on how the adults handle their own mood. So if you are uptight and you're anxious and you're crabby, guess what? Your kids are going to be uptight, anxious, and crabby. So this is the time in your life where you have to try and be as calm as you can be throughout the day, because then the kids are going to do better as well. One of the ways sometimes to shift the emotional mood of the house if things are getting really tight is to just do something really wacky and silly. Put a silly hat on the dog. Have everybody go to the bedrooms and see if they can do a mismatch day, and you put clothes on that totally don't match anything else. My sister and brother-in-law do this funny thing at their house where if somebody gets up from the dinner table or the lunch table to go to the bathroom, all the other members of the house go and hide somewhere in the house. And then they come back to the table and there's nobody there and they have to go and find them. It's a fun way to do a hide and seek. So some other things that I think are very helpful is finger painting with your kids, or regular painting. But finger painting is really the best if you can handle the mess, because it's the tactile part that feels good on their fingers and it moves them out of their brain and the thinking part into the feeling part of the brain. And that's very helpful for adults as well. Art therapy is something that we use a lot of times in psychotherapy, and I found finger painting to be one of the best. Another thing that was helpful was working with clay. Anytime you're working with your hands, again, it helps you get out of your head and get into your body. Some other things parents can do is scavenger hunts. Do a scavenger hunt inside the house. Make a list of things that the kids have to find. Or outside if you've got a backyard, front yard, or if you've got a park or somewhere in the neighborhood, make a list of things that they have to find. Get out the old-fashioned board games. You know, if it's Scrabble, or if it's Life, or if it's Chutes and Ladders, whatever the case may be. Get Twister out if you have that. Do puzzles. Build a blanket fort. Make a card for Grandma and Grandpa that you can actually mail to them in the mail. They would love to get that. Have a dance party. Do it virtually if you want to hook in with their cousins and other people. Play Simon Says. Play Duck Duck Goose. Have a tea party. Have a pretend play party where you might play banker or grocer or teacher or builder. Read books to them and have them read books to you. Distraction is a great thing for the mind, and all of these games and things are going to be great distractions. The other thing I always tell people that I think we often think of enough is tell the kids the story of the day they were born. They love hearing that story of when the contraction started, where you were, what you did, you know, how you got to the hospital, what things were like, what you thought the minute you saw them, when you held them in your arms. That brightens up kids more than you would imagine. So that's just a few ideas.
Those are great. Thank you, Lee. How do we trust people in public? Every time somebody coughs, we don't know that we should trust them. Maybe they have it, maybe they're sick. How do we get past this for the next couple of months?
That's a really great question. It is really difficult to kind of get out of that immediate sensation of somebody coughing and you want to jump away. That's why I think the 6 feet of social distancing, science has showed that works. And that's why they do 6 feet. Because if I cough and I have the virus and you're 6 feet away from me, it isn't going to get onto your body and you're not going to be contracting it. I think you have to just do what you can control, which is stay the 6 feet away, wear a mask. A lot of people are wearing masks in public now, and the CDC is recommending that. All those protective factors are going to help you, and then just keep reminding yourself that you have those protective factors and you're doing what you can do.
Great. Do you have any tips for working from home, you know, not in your typical office setting? So maybe you're at the kitchen table, you're sitting in an unusual chair, anything to kind of help alleviate stress that way?
That's a really great question as well. What I would suggest is try and first of all, have a routine. Schedules are super important. Human beings do well when we have structure and we have routine, especially children as well. So number one, make sure you're going to bed at the usual time you go to bed when you go to work. Get up at the usual time when you get up when you go to work. Do your breakfast routine the same way that you usually do. And then if you can kind of like have a corner of a room that is dedicated to this is where I'm going to do my work, have it be that every single day. Just like if you go to your office at work or whatever you do for work, it's that same place every single day. The other thing you want to do is make sure that other family members who are also home know that this is my dedicated space and these are the hours that I need to be doing this. Now that's tough for if you've got 2 parents who are working from home and you've got small children. Obviously, you're not going to be able to work 8 hours a day, and hopefully your boss is being understanding about that, and you're going to trade off times between you and your partner so that you get this time for maybe 2 hours, then she gets 2 hours, you get 2 hours, whatever the case may be, and the other one is attending to the children. Try and, if you are having a difficult time getting comfortable in a chair, just do the best chair that you can find in the house. Put pillows behind you if that's something that's going to make you physically more comfortable, because you know if you're not physically comfortable, your brain is not going to be able to focus and do well on that. And then here's the next part. Don't work overtime. When the day is done, the day is done. Put the computer away, go and do some fun things, do some physical things, try and have that balance of sitting time and body movement time.
This one is more of a comment, but somebody is saying that they usually go straight to that end of the world scenario thinking. So they really appreciated that part of your presentation. It was a great reminder for them.
Good, and that's something you need to just keep reminding yourself of every single day. Catch yourself having that catastrophizing thinking and just say stop it and think about the positives.
Is your clinic open and are you taking appointments now? How would somebody get in touch with you?
Yes, we are open, and just about every clinic I know in town is open, by the way, and we're all doing telehealth or telephone sessions. Wonderfully, Medicare, Medicaid, and all of the insurance companies that we deal with have agreed to allow telehealth sessions, and they will let us to bill for those sessions and they will pay for those sessions. UMR, which does a lot of the self-funded program plans like GreenHeck and NTC, I know is under UMR, they are allowing telehealth sessions as well. Some of our clients, because we're a nonprofit agency, a large percentage of our clientele are on medical assistance. And so a lot of those families don't have the technology on their end to be able to do telehealth. And so we're doing telephone sessions, and wonderfully that insurance companies are allowing that as well, and they're paying for that for 90 days. So starting March 15th through June 15th, they are allowing that to be an allowable procedure, if you will, and to be able to bill for that. So new clients are welcome at our place. You just need to call our office. As the director, I'm at the office every day. My accountant is there a half a day, Monday through Thursday, and I have one receptionist instead of two on staff. We're fluctuating days for them because their area is small and we can't really keep them 6 feet apart. And then my administrative assistant is there every day. So we are open for business, absolutely. You can call our office, it's 715-675-3458. And it'll either be Cindy, Jill, or Jody that answers the phone, and they can set you up to see a therapist if you need to establish as a new patient, a new client.
Do you have any tips for anybody who would be using telehealth for the first time? So like if they should be in a certain room or a comfortable setting, you know, is there anything that would guide people in that sense?
Great question. Yes, because here's the hard part, you know, therapy needs to be confidential. We can guarantee that on our end that it's confidential, but we can't guarantee that on your end. So you need to see if it's possible for someone to be watching the children while you're taking an hour to have your therapy session. Best if you can do that in a separate room with a door that shuts. It's really best if you can keep the dog out of the room and the cats out of the room, although I know that's tough sometimes because cats hate closed doors and they're going to be scratching to get into that room. Think also in terms of you want to have the light shining on you, so you want to be facing the window. If you have the window behind you, then you can't see the face of the person that you're looking at. Those are probably the biggest tips that I would say for telehealth. And then I know it's a little bit weird because there'll be a delay. So your therapist will say something to you and then the screen kind of freezes up a little bit and you're seeing what their face looked like 5 seconds ago and it catches up. I mean, none of us love that. I have to admit, none of my therapists are loving this telehealth, but it gets the job done and it's been working very well.
Wonderful. We're actually out of questions and we are at time, just perfect timing. So perfect. Thank you so very much, Lee. This has been extremely helpful for me. So I am hoping that same for all of our attendees. As mentioned before, and in some of the questions, this has been recorded. We will share and make accessible to those who are not able to be on the call and for those of you on the call. So you will get that presentation, you will get those references and all of the questions that came through. So thank you to Lee and thank you for everyone for attending. We hope you have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everybody. Remember, we're all in this together.
Thank you.